So we just got done watching the divisional round of the playoffs, and there's certain storylines that emerge. Jaden Daniels being a rookie going on the road and beating the top seeded Detroit Lions, and the Lions kind of shitting the bed there a little bit, right? The Chiefs moving on. The pursuit for their third straight continues. The Eagles holding off the Rams, and then you get to the Bills holding off the Ravens barely. And lots of talk coming out of that game about Lamar Jackson, the assumed league MVP, which especially makes sense considering he was the first team All-Pro quarterback. It's been a long time since the quarterback that was named first team AP All-Pro wasn't also voted the MVP. So at the moment, it feels like a logical conclusion to jump to. A lot of talk will be about whether he came through for his team or whether he choked and had another bad playoff performance. And that's perhaps another conversation for another day. But, you could look at that both ways, right? Yes, he got his team in position late. Mark Andrews fumbled in the fourth. Mark Andrews dropped a two-point conversion. But you could then also say, well, what if Lamar doesn't throw that bad pick early on? What if he doesn't have that atrocious fumble? All fair points, right? But so much of the focus is going to be on Lamar Jackson and whether or not he's got Peyton Manning's disease. And okay, fair enough. Like, you can't be the MVP and then avoid the criticism when your team loses. Like, you can't just get all of the praise, right? Like, unfortunate, I guess, but that's the reality of it. But what I don't see enough of is the talk about John Harbaugh being a choker himself. And I think it's time to have the John Harbaugh conversation, because while I've had the conversation before about Mike Tomlin and even Kyle Shanahan for different respects and different reasons, like, it seems like John Harbaugh just seems to fly under the radar here. But he really shouldn't. And you have to wonder at what point in time do the Baltimore Ravens and or John Harbaugh realize that the best thing for both parties is to go their separate ways. Frankly, I think that time probably came a few years ago, but this is not to dismiss John Harbaugh and say he's a bad coach. No, this is more about just because somebody's been the coach for you for a very long time doesn't mean he always should have been, right? And when you think about that, you could say the Ravens, since they moved to Baltimore in 1996, I think they've had, three head coaches in their history. Ted Marchibroda, Brian Billick, and then since 2008, John Harbaugh. So Harbaugh's been there for 17 seasons. And in that time, 11 seasons of 10-plus wins, 6 AFC North titles, a Super Bowl title, only 2 regular seasons where his team finished below 500. That was back in 2015 and 2021. 172 and 104 in the regular season, 623 winning percentage. Actually has a winning record in the playoffs, 13 and 11. So type of resume that someday people are going to be talking about whether John Harbaugh will end up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But I look at that resume, and you know what I see? I see an awful lot of Mike Tomlin. I see an awful lot of Mike McCarthy. And as much as I feel like Mike Tomlin has avoided criticism to certain degrees, I think John Harbaugh has avoided even more, and I don't really get it. Because even if you want to point to, well, you win a Super Bowl and you consistently win for a long period of time, you're going to be pretty safe from a job security standpoint, even when you go back to 2012, that season and that playoff run. If the Broncos secondary doesn't absolutely shit the bed on coverage late in the fourth quarter, the Ravens don't tie that game and then go into overtime where Peyton Manning can later choke it away. Like, they barely even got there. And then once they get to the Super Bowl, they go up huge on the Niners. Yes, Jacoby Jones kicks it off, and wasn't it like 28-6 or some shit like that? Somewhere in that vicinity. And then the power goes out, and all of a sudden, the 49ers come back like gangbusters, and the Ravens almost pissed that one away too. Like, if you remember, there was a first and goal situation. Like, the Ravens are fucking lucky. Harbaugh's lucky to even have won a Super Bowl. And oh, by the way, that shit was 12 years ago. And at some point in time, that just can't be good enough. Like, it's one thing if you were saying, well, he's coaching the Chicago Bears, a scrub-ass organization where they would certainly allow a Super Bowl winning head coach to hang on too long. I could get that. I could see that, right? But you're talking about the Ravens. Like, they're supposed to be one of the class top flight organizations in the league, like the Steelers. They should fucking know better. And you can point to, well, it's the stability of the head coach has been a big key. But yeah, it's also been a theme that at times they've held on to coaches for too long when it's staring them straight in the face that it's time to move the hell along. And that's where we're at here. Because what we're looking at now, if we talk about John Harbaugh, is a guy that, mind you, in the past 6 seasons, this takes a little bit of projection here, but it's reasonable to make this projection. In the past 6 NFL seasons, he has had the MVP of the league 3 times. That's 50% of the time. 2019, 2023, and 2024. The most important position in the game, he has had the league's most valuable player, whether you agree with the awards each time or not, whatever. That's the reality, though. Lamar won it in 2019. He won it in 2023. He's very likely to win it here in 2024. He has had the MVP of the league 3 times in a 6-year stretch and has played in 1 conference championship game and 0 Super Bowls. How the fuck does that even happen? And as much as we could talk about Mike Tomlin's shit in the bed in the playoffs, because he certainly has since 2017, right? Like, you look at the Ravens' history in recent years under Harbaugh, it's not great. 2019, Lamar's first MVP season, they go 14-2. Remember, they're the 1 seed. They got home field advantage. Derrick Henry and the Titans come in and run that shit down their throat, and they lose 28-12. You can blame Lamar, but you got to blame the head coach, too. 2020, they're 11-5. They get their revenge on the Titans in the wild card round, but then they lose 17-3 to Bills in the divisional round. Next year, 8-9, they miss the playoffs. 2022, 10-7. Lose to the Bengals in the wild card round. I know what you're going to say. Well, they didn't have Lamar in that one. It was Tyler Huntley. Fair enough. But there's a pattern here at some point in time of this Ravens team underperforming and sometimes underperforming significantly come playoff time. You look at last year. Lamar's MVP again. They beat the Texans 34-10 in the divisional round, but when it comes time and the chips are on the line, they lose to the Chiefs 17-10. You can make whatever excuses about refs and Mahomes and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is they didn't get the fucking job done. And then you turn around this year, they're 12-5, win their division. Lamar Jackson is the presumptive probable league MVP. They beat up on the Steelers in the wild card round, sure, but when they face like a legit contender like the Ravens are supposed to be this year, they come up short to the Bills 27-25. Just think about that. Like, you've got a pattern of behavior here that suggests that John Harbaugh himself is in the Peyton Manning chokes in the playoffs club. Consistently. Even if you go back to the Super Bowl that they're lucky to have fucking won. They missed the playoffs the next year. Then I think 2014 they lose in the divisional round. And then they went 3 straight years without making the playoffs. Like, shit, he probably should have been fired after 2017. He's lucky he got that much longer. And all that's done now is kick the can down the road till you wonder, like, what the hell are the Ravens doing here? Now, I know what you're going to say is you're going to say, well, you've had other multiple-time league MVPs not win the championship or make it to the Super Bowl in their MVP season. I get that, right? Like, you look at Peyton Manning, who was a 5-time league MVP. I'm talking AP MVP, just to be clear. And we know he's one of the greatest gag artists across any sport in the clutch and in the playoffs. It's just a fact. Like, that makes you emotional. That's your problem, not mine. Tremendous regular season performer. All-time great quarterback overall. But his playoff resume is dog shit. For the level of regular season quarterback Peyton Manning was, playoff Peyton was an entirely different thing. It's really, really bad. And you think about it. In his 5 times that he was a league MVP, he made it to the Super Bowl twice in those MVP seasons. 2003, 2004 under Dungy, didn't make it either time. Made it in 2006, right? He was MVP twice with Jim Caldwell as the head coach and made it to the Super Bowl in the 2009 season, loses to the Breeze and the Saints. 2013 under John Fox, MVP, get their shit rocked in the Super Bowl by the Seahawks. But at least one thing you could say, those MVPs by Peyton Manning span multiple coaches, and he eventually would go on to win a Super Bowl under Tony Dungy. And he later won a Super Bowl being carried by the Broncos defense in that 2015 season, but he made it to other Super Bowls as MVP. Aaron Rodgers, you could say, well, his 4 MVP seasons, he never made it to the Super Bowl, but at least he made it to the conference championship twice in 2014 and 2020. And he did that under 2 different head coaches. It's ironic when you think about Tom Brady, the GOAT. His 3 MVP awards, like he had a divisional round exit in 2010 and 2 Super Bowl appearances where he lost both of them, 2007, 2017. But again, at least he made the Super Bowl multiple times as a 3-time MVP. Brett Favre in the 90s. You go back, conference championship round loss to the Cowboys in 95 as the MVP. 96, Super Bowl title. 97 season, Super Bowl loss to the freaking Broncos. You know, you go back in the history of the AP award, the only other 2 that I can recall that were 3-time winners were Johnny Unitas and Jim Brown. And Jim Brown was a running back, so it's a little different here. But even he led his team to the championship game in 57, and Johnny Unitas was MVP in 59 when his team won it all. So you're talking about here a potentially epic fumble the bag. As important as the quarterback position is in today's game, we could talk about Lamar and the choking and this and that, but if Lamar is a fucking choker, what happens with the head coach that's had the league MVP 50% of the past 6 seasons and can only make the championship game of his conference one time, can't even make the Super Bowl, let alone be a threat to fucking win it? What does that make him? And you bring in a Derrick Henry and he's supposed to be the big difference maker, and when shit gets to get, it just doesn't fucking happen. Again, I'm not saying John Harbaugh is a bad coach, but every NFL head coach has a shelf life for his team, and some certainly are much shorter and some certainly much longer than others. But it feels like we have gotten past the functional, healthy shelf life of John Harbaugh with the Ravens. The Ravens would be an incredibly attractive job. They could get a great candidate. People would be lining up to get that job. John Harbaugh left. Other teams, rightfully so, would be knocking down the door, bidding for his services. The best thing to me that could happen for both sides is for them to go their separate ways. Now, this isn't going to happen, but the conversation needs to happen because as much as the focus, again, is going to be on Lamar and the choking in the playoffs, the guy that has an even bigger, longer history of choking in the playoffs is the guy that's overseeing it all. How is the head coach escaping blame, accountability, and responsibility here? It's psychotic to me. So if we're going to shit on Mike Tomlin for playoff failures, and rightfully so, we should be doing the same damn thing for John Harbaugh. Like, what makes you think that Harbaugh is going to get this team back to another Super Bowl at this point? What makes you think that he would lead this team to a Super Bowl title? Because even when you look at the one that he won, it was kind of flukish in the way that they fucking do it, and he barely had to hang on to do so. I'm just saying. Like, for an organization that's supposed to be one of the best in the league, and don't get me wrong, the Ravens absolutely are, they're getting to a place where they're starting to accept mediocrity more than they might think, and more than they might like to believe. I think it's time they not only have the John Harbaugh conversation, frankly, but I think it's time that both sides go their separate ways, because you keep Harbaugh around too long, he'll go from being the hero to becoming the villain, and it's only going to get worse the longer he's there and they don't win a championship. And frankly, like, how many more times can you reasonably expect a Lamar Jackson to win the MVP? This could be it. Like, he could win another 1 or 2. He could. But he may never get close to that again. And you have now fumbled the bag with the league MVP 3 times in the past 6 seasons, not even getting to the Super Bowl once, only getting to the conference championship once. Like, that's choking in the big spots from a head coach. That's all I'm saying.